Hey everyone, I'm Sam Alcaine, and welcome to our COVID-19 and food safety office hours. I say that with a little trepidation because it might suggest that we're moving on from COVID-19 because it's no longer a concern, but I want to be clear, COVID-19 is still here and it is still a concern. In fact, if we look at where we were this time last year, we're at nearly the same levels of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, right? And that covers over, right, that gigantic peak that we had this past winter with the Omicron variant and the high peak in deaths. So it's not gone, and we're seeing a lot of states, businesses, and countries, regardless of their political lean, lifting COVID-19 restrictions in an attempt to return to normal. But all that's really doing is shifting the responsibility and the daily risk assessments to individuals and businesses. So going forward, you're going to have to ask yourself what COVID-19 mitigation practices are you going to keep in place and which ones are you going to shelve, right? Last year, we saw a decrease in cases over the spring and summer, which was great. But then fall hit and we had the Delta spike and then we had Omicron. So what is your business going to do? Are you going to be reactive when the next, wave comes, or are you going to be proactive? Are you going to require masks seasonally? If so, when does that start? How early are you going to do that? Are you going to incentivize future boosters? Are you going to think about density for the work floor, for events, for offices? Will remote work remain an option for some of your staff? What will your sick leave policy look like moving forward? And will it be amenable to potential issues that we have with COVID-19 going forward? Okay. I don't have a crystal ball to tell me, what this coming year is going to look like, but people all over the world are still being infected, right? And we know it's also in animal populations like deer here in the US and minks. So the one thing I am sure of is that COVID-19 is not behind us. Now, that being said, the intensity of this pandemic over the past 2 years has really drawn our focus away from a lot of the things that we need to continue successfully as businesses. So we need to figure out how to rebalance in this COVID-19 world moving forward. And that's a bit about what future office hours are going to be about, focusing on food safety in a COVID-19 world. So what we'll be doing is talking about food safety, and when new things emerge around COVID-19, we'll bring those up and discuss them as well. And so today we're going to start with a little primer on reviewing your food safety plans and also how to get started into this whole food safety plan process. And then we'll open it up to questions for the panel, whether it's around the food safety discussion that we have today or whether it's around some COVID-19 questions. And we have a bit of both submitted from everybody earlier. So let me give a brief introduction for the panel, and actually one quick question for everybody. As we're moving to this food safety focus, we've got a quick little poll survey for you. How do you feel about this transition from COVID-19 to also including food safety topics? Is that good for you? Is that bad for you? Not sure. We still keep coming because we want to make sure that these office hours still remain engaging and relevant for everybody. So with us today, we've got Dr. Betsy Bihn, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Food Safety at Cornell University and the Director of the Produce Safety Alliance. We've got Dr. Aliosa Trimick, who's an Extension Associate in our Dairy Extension Program and our COVID-19 resource guru. We've got Dr. Callie Neal, who's a Professor of Microbial Food Safety in the Department of Animal and Food Sciences at the University of Delaware, where she explores the transmission of public health and food safety relevant viruses and pathogenic bacteria. We've got Dr. Ruth Petrin, who is the president of the International Association for Food Protection and the founder of Ruth Petrin Consulting, with years of experience in identifying and tracking emerging food safety trends and new control strategies. And I'm Sam Alcaine, an assistant professor here in the Department of Food Science, with a focus on dairy food safety and artisan food safety. We also have officials from New York State Ag and Markets on the call from both the food safety and dairy divisions if there's some regulatory questions. And if you want to ask questions, all you need to do, right, is click that little chat icon there at the bottom of your screen. It'll pop up, and then you can type your question into the chat box. You can send it to everyone, or you can send it just to me if you want to remain anonymous, and I will read it out to the crowd. So start thinking about questions as we go over what's going on for today. And with that, I am going to hand it over quickly to Al to give us just an update on what is going on with our COVID-19 resource page. Are there any updates? Because again, COVID-19 is not going away, so we're always going to want to keep track of what's coming up that's new. So take it away, Al.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so when it comes to food industry resources, food industry guidance, there's no new documents that we put there. So all of it works, all of them are relevant. It just depends, like Sam said, what is your strategy, how are you going to use them? One thing we are expecting is under COVID-19 modeling, we're expecting some guidance for food industry that will be based on the computer modeling that Dr. Ivanik's group from Cornell is doing. So stay tuned for that one. Under consumer resources, we added one CDC document that's putting together scientific information that shows that COVID-19 vaccine boosters are still remain safe. And there's another interactive ventilation tool that they published that can maybe help you determine your ventilation and exchange rate and so on. Under tracking COVID-19, you can still find different trackers where you can follow the numbers in US, internationally, different states. So you can follow the progress we've made in the past months. Like Sam said, it's good, but we're still not there. So under the tracking COVID-19, we still have peer-reviewed papers. We added 3 new, one on transmission of Omicron variant and its ability to evade immune system. There's a publication on effectiveness of face masks and N95s. And then another one on effectiveness of 2-dose and 3-dose mRNA vaccinations against COVID-19. And another on safety of boosters. With this is basically what's going on our webpage. We're going to post the next date and time for our virtual office hours on the page. And as always, if there's any questions or comments, you have contacts of our experts here if you want to send us a question or any comments. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for the update, Al. And if anyone's got any questions, feel free to ask them and keep checking out the site. We're still getting a ton of hits, so it's pretty impressive that people are still using this as a regular resource, which is great. That's why we built it. So today, we are going to kind of, again, as I mentioned, switch a little bit of our focus. And we had been planning this for I'm looking for my screen here, for the start of the year, but we were in the middle of the Omicron wave and we really felt it was important to focus on that rather than making the transition. So this is kind of going back and talking about our food safety resolutions and looking back at our food safety plans. And I'll start off with this section and then I'll hand it off to Betsy, who will talk a little bit more. So I know we're going to have some produce growers here that might not have gotten into this, talking about the steps to actually get into it. So, but beginning with, I don't know about everybody else, but I still have now been going back to my office, and I don't know if anyone still has that calendar hanging on their wall from 2020. I still have a 2020 calendar hanging on my wall, and that means it's been 2 years, right? And you're supposed to be reviewing your food safety plan at least, right, every 2 years. And so now, if you haven't done it already, now it's time to kind of go back and look at it. We've been really focused on COVID-19 mitigation practices, and there might be some things doing all that might have fallen off the wagon, and we need to catch back up. And I'm gonna kind of be touching about, what are the areas that we need to be thinking about. So if you've taken the FSPCA course on preventative controls for human foods, you might recognize this wonderful little checklist, which I like as a pretty good primer on, if you're going to go back and reanalyze your food safety plan, which you should be doing, these are some key tasks that you should be focusing on. And how does this, kind of relate to COVID-19? Well, starting with the beginning, who is on our food safety team, right? There's been a lot of turnover in jobs, right? People have moved on, new people have joined the company. Is that team still there? And if not, who should be in it? Are they in the same roles? Are there new members that you should be incorporating, right, to bring a diverse perspective to reviewing that food safety plan? So that's the first thing. Who is your food safety team now after we've gone through COVID? Secondly, right, we talk about product flow diagrams, right? Over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of modifications to our production floors to accommodate the way our workers are, to accommodate spacing, to accommodate the way we handle packages. What have those changes done to the way that our product flows through the facility? And is that captured in our food safety plan diagrams? And one of the things, right, a lot of us have been working from home and away from the facility if we don't need to be there. So if you're responsible for the food safety plan, it's an important time to go back, walk the lines, and ensure that they align with the process flow diagrams that you have written, because changes may have happened that you were not made aware of. And I've seen it happen in times when it's not COVID-19. And so the likelihood of something of that happening in someone's facility is probably even more so during the past 2 years. You need to go back and review your hazard analysis. Again, a lot of things have changed during COVID-19. We've had a lot of supply chain issues. Have you changed the ingredients that you need to use for your products? Have you changed where they're sourced from? Does that impact the risk assessment that you have for those ingredients? Did you have to change your formulations because you couldn't get maybe a certain acidifier, or you needed to put in a different preservative because you couldn't get what you were normally using? How do those impact your hazard analysis? Did you add products? Did you remove products because there wasn't demand for them? If you have, then you can pull those out of your food safety plan and streamline it. Or if you've added new products, make sure then that they are captured in this hazard analysis. And then maybe, right, again, because of these supply chain issues and distribution issues, did you have to change the way you distributed your product? Did it go from, ambient to refrigerated, or refrigerated to ambient? And what impact does that have, right, on the safety of your products? So these are key areas that you need to sit down and go through. Now, beyond that, talking about our controls that we've put in place to control the hazards that we've identified in our hazard analysis, and this is, high level review. We're talking about our process controls. Now, a lot of these, right, are pretty standard. They probably haven't shifted during COVID-19, but I'd say one of the big things, again, that we need to think about is our staffing. And a key thing here is who is responsible for monitoring these controls, and are they trained appropriately? One of the key things in our food safety plan is making sure that the individuals who are monitoring or carrying out a preventive control are qualified for that activity. So you need to go back. If you brought on new people, have they been trained, right, in those monitoring techniques? Do they understand why they're doing them? And are they recording everything accurately? And then do they know what to do if for some reason there is a deviation and a critical control is not met? I think this is a big piece when people are going to come back and audit you, because we've had a lot of change, a lot of turnover in people. Are they appropriately trained? And I think training is a key thing that we need to get back on. It has been difficult, right, to do in-person trainings and getting everybody in a room. So again, we have some online trainings towards some of this, but again, rethinking, now that things are opening up a bit more, or having people travel, we're having in-person classes. Should we be scheduling some in-person training for our workers to make sure that they are trained appropriately in food safety? When it comes to sanitation controls, and actually this came up on a call that I had earlier today, is again, with COVID-19, we were very concerned with traffic patterns of people, right? To maintain those 6 feet of separation and people coming in one area and leaving the other. Did that mean that you had to change the traffic flow for your facility? And what impact does that have on your zoning? Did you account for that? You should go back and review. What are the actual traffic patterns now after 2 years with COVID-19, and what implications do they have for your food safety plan and your hygienic zoning? You may have implemented things like barriers in between your workers right here on the line, and again, that was to help protect, everybody from the transmission of COVID-19. But how easily were those barriers, how cleanable are those barriers? How were they set up? Could they be potential harborage sites? Go back and review those. Are you going to keep them in place? Are you going to remove them? What's going on there? You also may have again, because of demand for different types of products, you might have ended up idling certain pieces of equipment or not use certain areas of your facility. Because those have been sitting for a number of time, things like biofilms could have built up as they've sat unused. So if you're going to start bringing those pieces of equipment or start using those different areas of your facility back into regular use, you need to really think about the cleaning and sanitization of that equipment before you bring it back. And then another thing is, because of COVID-19, we were very focused on PPE for our workers, right? Were they wearing, the appropriate face coverings? Were they wearing, glasses? Were they frequently washing their hands? We talked a lot, this past 2 years about verification of COVID-19 mitigation practices. And there might be some opportunities now to apply some of those verification practices to how you went back and verified that, right, the appropriate hygienic zoning, the appropriate hygienic practices were being followed within your facility. So that might be a benefit and an opportunity to learn from. So as you're, again, going back through your food safety plan and reviewing it, think about some of those positives from our COVID-19 practices that might then influence our sanitation controls as well. Now, going on into allergen controls, right? We have our big 8 allergens, and it will be important. It may not be a major issue for most facilities. As you're sourcing different ingredients, maybe there's some changes around what potential allergens might wind up in a particular ingredient that you're sourcing. I think the big thing to note this year that isn't going to be in effect until next year is that this 8 is no longer 8, right? We're going to be going up to 9, right? So we have sesame coming in, and we're going to need to be compliant with that labeling in 2023. So this is a good time to use 2022 to review your ingredient decks, make sure that sesame is or isn't in there. And if sesame is, that you're then updating your labels and your handling practices to treat it as an allergen, just like the other 8 that we've always been talking about. So we've gone to the big 9. When we talk about going back and reviewing our food safety plan in regards to our supply chain controls, again, because of sourcing issues and shipping issues, have we had a change in the ingredients that we're sourcing from, and do those ingredients have hazards that our suppliers are controlling for us, right? If we're dealing with the hazard within our facility, we don't need a supply chain control. But if our suppliers are handling that hazard, then we need to be focused on it. So has the sourcing of specific ingredients changed? I've been talking a lot about raspberries lately, and we had a really bad crop this past year on raspberries, and it's been difficult to source them. So people are getting them from wherever they can. Does sourcing them from another area of the world then have implications for safety? Have you caught those in your food safety plan? Have the shipping conditions of the ingredients that you're sourcing changed? Does that cause a potential risk? If there's a delay in those shippings and things like that you need to capture. When we talk about, again, sourcing, what are the actual facilities that are producing our ingredients? When we approve a supplier for an ingredient that requires a supply chain control, right? That approval is for a given facility. It's not for an entire company. So like if you're sourcing, from a large manufacturer that has multiple plants all over the United States, you would have approved a given facility, say one in Minnesota. If they had issues at that plant and they started shipping you ingredients from Iowa, right, and that Iowa plant was not part of your supplier approval process, technically you shouldn't be using it, right, as part of your supply chain control. So go back and review what facilities from your suppliers are actually sending you ingredients, and make sure that they've gone through the approval process for your food safety plan, because otherwise that will be a deficiency, right? There may then be required changes in your verification procedures for your supply chain controls. Make sure that you have the appropriate auditing, right, in place, that you have the auditing documents for the given facility. And you may need to change things, right? If the sourcing of your ingredients has changed to another area of the world, you might need to change your testing requirements, right? And ensure that those are in place. So I think supply chain controls could be a big, big gap for us right now, because of all the pivoting that we've needed to do with these issues with shipping. So go back and really dive into that to make sure you're not missing something there. And one of the other key areas that we don't want to have to deal with, because I think we spend a lot of time on the phones already, is going back and reviewing our recall plans that have been sitting on the shelves for these past couple of years. Right, one of the key things in our recall plan is being able to trace our products a step forward and a step back. Are our contacts current? Right, again, there's been a lot of turnover in multiple industries these past 2 years. So who are you going to call to let them know, that you need to recall product? Are the contacts at your retail chains the same that you've been using before? Are they different? Are your contacts at your state regulatory agency the same as they were before? Good to double check and give them a call. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you, to hear that you're updating your recall plan, not because you're actually having a recall. So that's an important one to do. Again, who are your supplier contacts that you need to reach out to? That's all important to reconfirm, because I guarantee some of those have changed in the last 2 years. Also, we've been struggling to survive as food businesses, trying to find outlets for our products wherever we can to make sure, that we're staying with our head above water during this pandemic. So are there new accounts that you've added? Are there accounts that you've cut out? You need to go back and then make sure that they're all captured in your recall plan, so that if you do have a recall, you're reaching out to the right people and not the wrong ones. Another thing is we've probably changed some of our product lineups. Are we producing the same products? Is there information captured in our recall plan? Are they in the same packaging? A lot of people during the pandemic, had difficulty sourcing different packaging. I spent a lot of time also in the beverage side of things. Getting the right aluminum cans has been a pain in these last 2 years. So you might have changed your packaging. When we do if we have to do a recall, we want to share all the relevant information, with our downstream, so they know what packages to look for. If you don't have the information there in your recall plan ready to hand out, it's going to make it that much more difficult for you to successfully execute a recall. So make sure labels, packaging, weights, accounts, all that is now captured, readily available, for that if you do have a recall, that information is ready to go forward. And so those are kind of a high level set of some of those key components here in the food safety plan for you to go over. Don't forget that you're also going to need to then, once you've updated this food safety plan, document that you've done this task, so that you can say it's been done in 2022, and then make sure that it's signed by all the appropriate members within your facility, including the owner or the agent in charge, because they need to be aware of any changes or gaps that were identified during this food safety plan reanalysis. Now, one of the questions that we got in our early submissions was what are some of the common deficiencies going on when there's an audit of your food safety plan? And so it's been a little while since I've been at a meeting where FDA has presented, but pre-COVID-19, FDA would share its top 5 deficiencies, and I've got those leading up, and I'd be surprised if they've changed all that much. So one of the key deficiencies in 2018 was really around an incomplete hazard analysis, So you hadn't captured all the hazards or risks or steps within your process, and when FDA came to audit, they noticed there were gaps. There were things around sanitation controls not being in place, verification of sanitation practices were not being fully documented. So again, think about the documentation and verification that you had to do for COVID-19. Maybe you can apply some of those policies to bring your sanitation verification practices up to speed. Allergen controls not being in place, and equipment design not actually being sanitary, so not cleanable equipment. That was in 2018. When we looked at 2019, again, you see that a lot of these things carry over. The number one deficiency was, again, an insufficient hazard analysis, where the identification of that hazard was not appropriately done. Number 2 was just having an overall food safety plan in place. Number 3, again, revolved around sanitation controls and the appropriate verification. Remember, your procedures, you need to have written procedures, and then you need to document, right, your verification observations, whether that's, a visual inspection of equipment, whether that's writing down the concentration of your cleaning chemicals in your sanitizer, that needs to be done. Establishing appropriate monitoring procedures for your process controls, again, verification procedures around sanitation, and then correctly identifying your preventive controls, which kind of falls into this hazard analysis. So that was 2018, 2019 leading into the pandemic. FDA does regularly publish information on the recalls that are out there and what deficiencies they see. And Ruth, I just gonna call on you really quick because I know you had done a little looking into what was going on this past year. What did you see there?
What I looked at was the database of 483s, which is the deficiencies that FDA would raise in their investigation in a particular facility. And they really do follow along these same patterns that we've seen in the past. But the number one that has been in place for at least the last couple of years since 2019 is the existence of a foreign supplier verification program. That's the regulation requiring manufacturers who source ingredients or items from outside of the US to verify that that outside manufacturer, supplier, et cetera, has the right practices in place. So it's just basic development and presence of that FSVP is now number one. A couple other GMP things in line with these things related to concerns about pests being detected in facilities, and then the maintenance of the facility, including equipment, utensils, et cetera, in adequate conditions with cleaning and sanitation. So I think it's evidence to me that obviously food safety plan elements such as these are crucial and need to be there, but we can't lose sight of just these basic GMPs as well, sanitation and pest among those. So
yeah, that's a great primer. I'm going to put up a slide at the end. We do have a presentation around pest management from a team here at Cornell. It's an online presentation that we'll share that aligns with these gaps. So that's great. But yeah, right. I'm sure, right, in the past few years, right, some of those basics, right, when you're focused on COVID-19 and you're short of staff, some corners get cut, and we need to refocus and bringing those basics back up to speed here in 2022. So with that, some of you, right, are still getting into food safety plan development. And so I'm going to pass it over to Betsy Bihn because I know we this is a new thing for a lot of produce growers. And so talking about, what is the value of a food safety plan and what are some key steps as you're building it. So take it away, Betsy.
Thanks, Sam. When we were talking about this as a webinar, I do think it's important to talk about those operations, whether it be small grower, small processor. Some people just haven't formalized a food safety plan. They haven't been forced to, they're not subjected to audits. Maybe they're not even inspected because of their farm size. So I did want to include a few slides just talking about some basic food safety plan stuff and really starting with the value, because anytime you're making a decision for your operation, you have to find value in it. And so first of all, in the 22 years I've been doing this with farmers who don't have a plan versus those that do, the real key there is it keeps you and your operation clear about what your food safety goals are. To me, it lowers anxiety and it keeps people moving in the right direction, using their time and their money most efficiently. And since we don't have unlimited time and money, this to me is a really important aspect. It's also important because you can use it in training and you can make sure that everybody in your operation is on the same page, right? That's a key thing, making sure everybody's pointed in the right direction. If you're going to have a third-party audit, you're going to need a food safety plan. For some of the FSMA produce safety FSMA rules, you need parts of that, right? The produce safety rule does not require a written plan, but you're required to have things in place that would be part of a plan. And this goes for some of the other FSMA rules as well. It's also beneficial for other parts of your operation, and I'll give you a few examples. In terms of record keeping, we've definitely had people report that their record keeping actually has helped them identify what sells better in certain markets, what kind of money they should be coming home with from farm markets and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to recognize when something is beneficial in multiple areas. I often refer to this as the double smiley face, right? So you're improving your overall food safety, but you're also improving your business. And that's the really important thing, and to invest in those things that have multiple impacts to your business. It also helps you keep track of the resources you're using, right? By monitoring use of chemicals, by monitoring injection systems, you will figure out if your injection system is working well. Why does that matter? Well, because post-harvest quality is also tied into that, right? Not only is it food safety, but it's also post-harvest quality. So those are just some of the reasons, and these reasons overlap whether you're a farmer or a processor, right? So that's first and foremost the issue. Next slide, Sam. The other thing that's important is to realize you don't have to start from scratch. There are templates everywhere. I did a Google search this morning just to humor myself. And within our own programs at Cornell, the National GAPS program, plus our decision trees, which are available at the National GAPS website, and I can put these links in the chat box afterwards. I did put them in the slide, Sam, if you can throw them in, but if not, I can do it afterwards. Basic templates for developing a farm food safety plan is there. The decision trees actually step you through your operation, each part of your operation, looking at risks, helping you have the language. In addition, there's templates and template SOPs, template record keeping sheets, all available for you to change. I also found this morning the Cornell Dairy program also has food safety templates. They focus more on the processing end. They include HACCP information as well. So again, at Cornell, just at Cornell, there's those resources. And then there's an FDA food safety plan tool builder that FDA has. In addition to these, I can also put a link in. You can find food safety templates from Penn State, from almost every land-grant university across the nation. So I don't want to be biased towards Cornell. I, of course, threw in our stuff because it's our stuff, but don't feel limited to that. And you can find one that works for you. What I have found working with farmers is some plans speak to them, right, more than others. It fits their operation. It fits the way they process information. So if you look at some of these templates and you think, man, that's really not for me, keep looking, because there's tons out there, and there may be one that makes more sense to you and how you think and how you process information. Next slide. So the key things to get started, very, very important. You got to identify one person in charge, and it cannot be just any person. And I've run into this with a couple of operations where people will hand it off to somebody who doesn't have the power in the operation to make decisions, to spend money, to tell other people what to do. Don't give it to that person. They're not in the right position. And give it to somebody who's got the qualifications. They know something about food safety. They know something about risks. The other thing is make sure they have the power within the company or the operation to make changes, right? If you need to invest in equipment, if you need to invest in resources, buy toilet paper, buy soap, do all those things, buy a portable toilet. You got to have somebody who has the power to make those decisions, right? So pick the right person. Train everyone in the operation. I have the most experience with the produce safety rule. And what's interesting is the produce safety rule focuses on people who handle covered commodities or touch food contact surfaces. That's great as a requirement, but everybody needs to be trained. Why is that? Because everybody's interacting with everybody else. And people can contribute to identifying risks and reducing risks. I would also say they can contribute to increasing risks. If they don't know what they're supposed to do, they can actually make things worse. So you really want to train everybody. It's also important because expectations have to be clear. People cannot read your mind. So they need to know what the expectations are and how to execute processes and practices properly. And the goal really here is to build this food safety culture. We talk about it all the time, but what does that mean? Part of what a food safety culture brings to your business, and that's the important part, part of what it brings to your business is that food safety is implemented every day by every person, right? It becomes the norm. And that's really where you want people to be. Because as Sam just pointed out in his presentation, when things change, you have to update things. Updating people getting them to modify one or two things is much easier than having to redo the whole thing every year, right? So you want these practices to be commonplace, to be what people understand, and to do every day while they're at work. That's what a food safety culture will bring to your operation. Certainly lowers the stress of employees and of you because you know things are being done properly. Next slide. And the things that you really need to begin are identifying those hazards in your operation, right? When I think about a farm, we have a ton of hazards on the farm, right? We have deer and mice and raccoons, you name it, we've got it on the farm. The key is all the hazards aren't risks, but you got to start by looking around and saying, what really concerns me? Then narrow it down to the things that are likely to actually cause illness or cause a problem in your operation, and really focus on those things that can cause illness and injury. Focus on those things because you don't have endless time and money. So you really have to prioritize where you're putting those practices into place. And you then want to come up with ways to reduce those risks, right? What are the things that need to be done? That's going to require training. Once you know what you want to do, train everybody to do it, monitor to make sure it's getting done, and verify that those practices are effective, right? That they're actually reducing risks. And lastly, this is where, not really lastly, but this is where the food safety plan really comes into it. After you've invested all of this time, you really want to document that information so that everyone can learn from it. Most of the time when somebody writes a farm food safety plan for the first time, they will notice quickly what is working, what is not working. And that's exactly what you want to happen. You can easily change these plans. If they're not chiseled in stone, they can easily be changed. The kicker, though, is to document those changes. Why did you make that change? What caused you to go down that road? That will help you think through as things change and as you need to make updates. Again, I'm going to go back to what Sam said at the very beginning of this. COVID caused us to rethink a lot of processes in our operations. You want to document what worked. I know from the farm perspective, a lot of changes that were made during COVID turned out to be better business in the end. And they kept those changes because it allowed them to manage crowds better. It allowed people to spend more time on the farm and spend more money on the farm. This is also true of wineries. We saw this. So the issue is, if you made changes, even if they were for COVID, you got to make sure you're updating your plan to reflect that. And that's exactly how the plan is supposed to work. You don't have to feel bad about making changes, right? They're expected. And that's, you do it at least yearly, but do it whenever those changes happen. And that's all I really wanted to add, Sam. So thanks for that time.
Sorry, my mute button moved. No, thank you, Betsy. Yeah, and that, for starting out, sometimes people feel a bit intimidated by jumping into the food safety plan. And it's a step at a time. It's a journey. Don't feel bad that you're just starting it off. In fact, you should be giving yourself a huge pat on the back that you're beginning it, because a lot of people put it up and then find themselves in a bad place. But there's a lot of benefits to having it, not just for your consumers, but as Betsy was noting, right, for your business. So, and if you got questions, we're all here as resources for food safety plan development. So keep reaching out, and we have courses online as well to help you get the foundations that you need to do this effectively.